University of Missouri Extension recognizes long-term farm family ownership by awarding the Century Farm Award to families who have been farming for at least 100 years. The farms must be 40 acres of the original homestead. The families must provide copies of deeds or other documents to prove ownership. While there are a number of Century farms in Jefferson County, farms where 3 generations are still operating and receiving the majority of their income from the farm is rare. The following is an inside look at the Bonacker and Weber families where 3 generations live, work, reflect on the past, and look forward to the future. Why, out of 3,400 farms in 1930 in Jefferson County, has so few remained viable today? These families have experienced many changes in agriculture over the past 100 years. Certainly the development of tractors and planters and combines, the use of chemicals and fertilizers, as well as breeding and genetics and general farming practices have had a large impact on agriculture.
We used horses until early 40s. My great uncle bought a tractor, and I don't know what year it was, but it was an old Fortson tractor, and he said it made too much noise and it scared the horses, so he parked it. And my dad, when he got to be about 18 years old, he fired it up and started plowing with it, and from that time on, well, it became a way of life to use some machinery, and he got rid of the horses. In about 1948, I was 12 years old.
You would get up and get breakfast and milk the cows. He had a tractor, but he mostly done farmed with the horses and mules. He had two sets of mules.
You keep plugging away, and as these technology gets there, you got to stay up with the times and keep your cows. And we took over back from Dad in '73. We were probably averaging about 40 pounds of cow of milk a day. Well, we had to keep growing that to where we're at now, to where we're about in the 70-some pounds a day. And you just got to keep plugging away at everything, and you can't afford to hire everybody to do your mechanic work. You got to do practically all your own mechanic work to make it work out, because if you try and hire it out, the amount of income you get, it won't pay. So you've got to be able to do almost everything this operation ourselves, and that's why we kept branching out and just expanding to make everything work.
The farm continued to expand till this day. It's always expanded. The Bonackers have always been in agriculture, and they expanded for years.
By chance, I got to work in cab tractors versus tractors that didn't have cabs. So I had the luxury, and I didn't have actually air conditioning in a cab, but I had a cab. And that was probably the biggest change, I think. You know, they had tractors. They started with horses, and they had tractors. We had the first 100 horsepower tractor, I guess, in the area, and it had by chance it had a cab. So we started out with what most people see today on the field. I started out with that. So.
We had a herd of cattle, but it wasn't nearly as big as what it is now. Things like the round baler, first one that we bought, which was a change in technology in all aspects. You know, my dad started throwing loose hay, and it was a big deal when they got a stationary baler that they brought the loose hay to and made a bale of hay, and then they could go stack it in the barn. And then you got the square baler as you know it. It was 1980 that we got a round baler. We actually borrowed Weber's round baler first to get an idea if we even wanted to use one. But yes, it was definitely a labor-saving, time-saving aspect, and we bought a round baler. The first one was used and had a hand tie program to it. You pulled the rope to pull the twine bar down into the baler so it would wrap string around it, and I was on an open tractor and it was dirty and it was nasty, and the clover hay that we put up was blowing in your face while you were trying to tie the bale, but it was definitely an improvement. The new baler has a monitor on it. You program it to tell the baler how big you want the bale and how much string you want to put on the bale, and the joke is we get the beep. When it beeps at you, you clutch the tractor because it's going to do its thing, and then you're going to dump the bale and start over.
We were what they call conventional tillage when I first started on the farm, and we had a couple years of heavy rains and multiple floods, and the river would wash the ground off right down to the plow pan, and did it numerous times in one year. And I can remember walking with my grandpa and my dad across the bottom, and Grandpa saying, "You guys are gonna have to figure out how to stop this or you're gonna lose your farm." And Dad kind of took it on his own to. I was too young, you know. That wasn't my decision to make. So Dad had to make the decision. But we switched from conventional till to no-till. I think Dad had dabbled with it a few times before we went at it that time, and didn't work mainly because we didn't have the herbicides to take care of the weeds. And the weeds usually took over the crop, and so that was the turning point where we kind of went 100% and just dove into it, mainly to protect the soil, because the soil was disappearing, it was washing down the river. And we started the no-till program and been after it ever since. I'm assuming that was in '83 that we were 100% no-till, and we haven't plowed a piece of ground since. We try new things, and Dad taught me to do it, and his father apparently taught him to do it, and I'm trying to teach my children to do it. And I have jumped with both feet into the precision ag, where we use GPS to you know, set up our fields so that we don't have too many point rows, and to track how much seed goes in the ground, how much fertilizer goes in the ground, to track the yield that you get off of it, to compare the two, to try to trim the cost, because seed is expensive and fertilizer is expensive, and you don't waste it.
We're using GPS systems now in the fields to help get straighter rows and help where you're at be more accurate with your spraying and fertilizer to cut cost. You always look for any way to save money to survive.
As a kid growing up, we had hogs, we had cattle, we raised corn, soybeans, wheat, barley, milo, hay, alfalfa hay, mainly alfalfa hay. We did have clover hay also. We were very, very diversified growing up, because as the philosophy was passed down, if one commodity wasn't making a profit, hopefully the others were. You know, when you had a bad year, say a drought, and the corn crop and the bean crop wasn't making it, you could fall back on milo. Milo was a dry weather crop. You could fall back on the cattle and the hogs. That's what got us through and allowed him to make land payments when he needed to make the land payment to buy these adjoining farms.
Through the years, they have found ways to survive drought and flood, low commodity prices, and difficult family relationships to keep the farm operating.
We have a unique situation here in that we're not a partnership. And the diversity that I talked about earlier is now a specialized farming. My brother row crops. It's strictly what he does is row crop. My main source of income is related to hay, whether it's baling to sell or custom work, but it all revolves around my hay equipment. And the cattle are supplement mine. I have my own herd, my dad has his own herd. We help each other and we communicate on different ideas of how to do things, and it's part of the reason why they're separate, because his idea and my idea are not always the same. But in the end result, the end want is the same, and that's that our children can survive in agriculture and can continue on with what it is that we do and what it is that we know. And my brother hit on it with the fact that you learn from previous generations' mistakes. And we try to pass that down, and every chance that I get, every time I see something happening, I point it out.
Everything revolves around the computer. Like Uncle Jeff said, he plugs his laptop into his combine to tell what's wrong. And it's the same thing you got to do with the truck any days now. Anything that breaks down, you plug it into a computer to know what's wrong. And you got to be able to know how the computer works to even know what's wrong with the tractor. And if you don't know what's wrong with the computer, then there's no way that you're ever going to do anything with new farming. And with the way that this economy is going, with just not making the old products, you can't use an old tractor. You can't use an old mower. You can't use an old rake or baler or combine or anything like that. You have to use the new stuff because they just quit making the old parts.
Every generation has to teach the other generation what they've done wrong, so that they never make that mistake twice. In order to be in order for a farm to keep going from one generation to the next, you can't make the same mistakes. You can't make the mistakes that my grandfather made. You have to learn from his mistakes and keep going forward. Now, the only reason that someone tells you that you need to stack hay bales a certain way, or you need to drive a grain truck a certain way, or you need to drive a tractor this way around a field is because they'd done it the wrong way the first time and they already know. So even though it's difficult for the next generation down to take that criticism or take that order or whatever word you want to use, it's only for your benefit that you're being told that.
My grandfather was not scared of change. He brought the tractor out and fired it up even though his father said it scared, or uncle said it scared the horses. He used the tractor. He knew he had to change. He knew he had to modernize. He knew he had to grow. My dad was the same way. He brought in Charolais cattle when everybody told him he was crazy, that they were not what we needed in this day and age, and that they weren't going to work and they weren't going to pay his bill and he was going to whatever. Same thing with the no-till farming. They laughed at him when he said he was going to no-till farm. You have to believe in yourself and you have to embrace changes and try them. Not saying that you're going to use them, not saying that every change is a good change, but you don't know unless you try them. And you have to have an open mind and give it a fair chance, no matter what it is. That if without that, no, we would not have survived farming.
They were good old days, and I've probably got a saying that I don't say too much anymore, but I always said we didn't do it like that back in the 40s. And we have progressed. My dad was very progressive. I feel like I was progressive, and my kids are very progressive. And in order to continue to do what we've done all these years, you have to be progressive. You can't look back and say, I want to go back, because that doesn't work.
Perhaps just as important has been the financial management exhibited by these families. Both farms manage assets in the millions of dollars by planting hundreds of acres of crops, having large beef and dairy herds on thousands of acres of production.
We switched from dairying to beef cattle, made that switch. We got our first Charolais cattle in 1963. And I got out of the dairy business in 1970, and we kept expanding our beef herd, kept buying adjoining farms. We've accumulated about 550 acres of continuous acres here. I guess we got between the boys and both the boys, they do a lot of row cropping, a lot of haying, and we rent some pasture, so we're probably running over 3,000 acres or so.
There's about 4,000 acres that we take care of. Well, I'm with row crops and pasture and stuff like that, and we own about 770, and then we rent about 3,300 acres is about what it amounts to. Well, we basically took over from Dad in 1973. At the time whenever he was farming, there was not such a demand on everything. You more or less you grew everything for your own survival. In other words, they had a garden, they took care of everything, and everything was raised for your family. Basically what you had and what little stuff you sold, that's the money you had. Well, as time went on, that got so expensive to buy, you couldn't stay at that smaller scale to have time to take care of a garden or do any of that other stuff. You had to get bigger, and you had to have bigger equipment and all that kind of stuff. So then that all worked into the Pioneer. You just don't have time for all that stuff that you did before, because as we grew older, we noticed we had less time to do what we had. And just like the last 10 years, we have less time now for ourselves than we did 15 years ago. When we took over, we had about 300 acres here, and it was about 70 cows milking at that time. Well, and whenever after we went a couple years into the situation, whenever we had to re-borrow money to keep paying everything, we couldn't operate. We had to get bigger or get out. So that's when we decided to expand. Our gross income last year was like 2.4 million. And it's so hard to decide what to do to make sure that you make the right decision, because one wrong move could really hurt you. You're talking $15,000, $20,000 with one wrong move right away, and it's hard to recover from that. There's just so much demand to do, because your profit margin is so slim that you can't operate otherwise. Because it's just no different than last year when our milk prices went from the year before was $20-some down to $10 last year. Well, there's no way you can operate under them circumstances. We were trying to operate under the same price that we got back in the middle 70s.
To be able to pay for it in agriculture is a challenge in itself. It was something that my dad did, and I really wonder how he got it done. And then looking back at some of the things that we didn't have growing up is probably how we were able to build what we had. We didn't have any of the extra pleasures and oddities that the neighbor kids had. Everything that was made was put back into the farm. The profit was put back into the farm in order to ensure that it's still here 5 generations later.
As the farm goes, we have to change from the old cab tractor that you manually shift to the new cab tractor that you push a button on. And they're more expensive. You have to do more with them to even pay for them. So the amount of ground that you cover doubles just to sustain it, and that amount of ground is dwindling. There's not the ground to do the work on. And I foresee it to be, you're gonna have to sell some of the ground, because the ground is worth more than the hay you get off the ground, or the crop that you can put in the ground. Because when that year comes that you don't have a hay crop or you don't have a row crop, you're going to have to give up the tractor, and you're not going to have the money for the next year to even go back to it. So for our 6th generation on the farm, we need to go to school, and we need to learn to do something else. And we need to do something that we can bring back to the farm to keep the farm moving and you got to find other ways from the property around you that you aren't using to make money off it too, like the cattle, the hay, the ground that's too wet to put crop on, put cattle on it. Or the woods that you're doing nothing with, cut firewood off it. I took that into my own hands last year. I supplied my grandfather and my other grandfather with wood for them to burn, to cut down on the cost of propane to heat a house. And then I can turn around and sell that wood to make my own profit as well. It's all a matter of what this economy is going to do. Is the hay going to stay up? Is the crops going to stay up? And do you want to do it? It's a lot of more work than people know.
A successful farm family has a long history of adapting to change and managing to stay competitive. Both families appear to have been early adapters of technology. Today, these farmers are using computers and GPS systems to increase efficiency. Education from schooling and from experience on the farm will carry the next generation into the future.
I tried to be as educated as I could be. You know, it's something I've tried to tell my children that the way the technology is and the amount of money that is involved in agriculture today, that they have to have more business sense. Probably going to have to go to school to learn business, because the handshake business is gone.
I went to Jeffco. I do have my associate's arts degree from Jeffco. We call it pre-agriculture just for the sake of calling it that. It's just all of the basic necessity type courses so that I could go on to a four-year college. I greatly wanted to go to a four-year college. I wanted to learn something that I could bring back home and help with the farm. I went to Mizzou. I talked to a professor up there and posed that question. What can you give me that I can take back home and use? He couldn't answer it. It was at that point that I realized that my dad was right and that I could learn more staying at home than I could going to school. It was a hard lesson. I had been told that, but I didn't want to believe it.
I went to Jefferson College and actually got my welding certificate, and that's the only thing I did after high school. I do all the welding. For anything that breaks down, I do all the welding around here.
I'm always maintaining the vehicles and the equipment around here. Dad's taught me a whole lot about the mechanics end of it, so I'm constantly changing oil, fixing tires, just anything. We've got our own shop by our house, and just always working on the tractors and the vehicles, and so that's a big part of what I do. I think I have to go to school. That is a must in this day and age. Like my father said about the technology, there's not a whole lot that he can tell me about the technology because he's still learning himself. So I plan on going to learn that and maybe go back and help him even continue, because you have to know about the computers and everything. I hope to go and learn something to fall back on, because it's a big if out there. If in 10 years there'll even be a farm to be farming with, I need something to go back on. I hope to stay in the ag industry, but I don't know if I can be on a farm planting crops, and I don't know if that'll be able to sustain myself. So I need something to fall back on, but hopefully it'll be in the ag industry still.
It's not just driving a tractor up and down a row like Uncle Jeff was saying. Everything's gone to computers nowadays. You push a button and it tells you which way to go, to keep the row straight, to put the most in the ground for the least amount of money. And me and Daniel and Dylan and all my other cousins are still learning from them who are still learning themselves. And sometimes it's difficult because your ideas cross. Because the younger generation knows more about the computers than the older generation. And sometimes it gets a little difficult, because when you say you got to do this and they want to sit there and figure it out and know that, and you just know that you can just do it, it's difficult because it's taking up time for everybody. In 5th grade, we had to take like a computers class. At that point, we knew more than my dad did. He didn't know how to type. He was using one finger on this stuff. By the time I was in 8th grade, I was laughing at him when he got on the computer.
The ability to change and stay competitive are lessons that should serve the next generation well. What does the future hold for these families?
10 years, I think I'll still be farming. It's pretty much, I guess I'm stuck with it now. I've been doing it for this long, and it's the only thing I know.
I plan on going to school, but not for agriculture. I want to be a teacher when I grow up. I might stay with kind of the cattle part, maybe if I have kids, maybe get my kids into the bucket calves and have them do the showing part with help of uncles and sisters and brothers. I'm not so sure I want to stay on the farm. I definitely want to be a teacher. That's my dream.
I'll probably come back to the farm, but I want to learn how to work on the tractors, know the computer stuff, and help other people with it.
I'm not going to say I'm happy being this generation of a farmer because I don't personally like that many of the things that we do on this farm. That's why I've started the firewood business. That's how I make my money. The hay business I like. I cannot stand the cattle. I don't do it. I showed a steer last year and I showed a steer this year, but that's because that's where the money is in the cattle. I don't find the putting cows on a pasture to produce the calf the money-making part of it, because the ground is worth more than the cattle you put on.
I think that a big part of agriculture staying here is that teaching the other people that don't know about agriculture, like what we do and how we help them with their everyday lives. I want to go to school and stay in the agriculture end of it, but I thought of being an FFA teacher. Part of the reason for that is because Northwest doesn't have FFA, and I believe that's bad because I think many kids can benefit from that program. 10 years from now, maybe I'll still be here and controlling all these boys, you know, keeping a hold on everything here.
Both families have an intense pride in their farming operations, and certainly they should, for only they know the hard work and sacrifice that has been invested in the farming operation.
I think there's an enormous sense of pride. That's one of the things that kind of keeps me going. I think it's pretty cool that I'll be the 6th generation and that's all we've done. I mean, everybody needs food, and to think that our family has kept growing and progressing to feed the world, basically, I think that's awesome. I mean, it makes me feel good.
I'm proud that this is the original 40 acres here was homestead, been in our family for forever. And I don't want this 40 acres to ever leave our family, the original 40. Because it's proud, and ain't very many people can say that their great-great-great-grandparents homesteaded this property. We've been here our whole life. It ain't very many people can say that.
The ability to change and stay competitive are lessons that should serve the next generation well. Certainly all the challenges that their families have faced in the past 100 years are still real today. These include the threat from urbanization, ability to create enough income to support the family, the need to expand the operation, and to remain efficient and profitable.